Hey everybody, it's Michael. I'm on with Heather Doering today. How are you, Heather?
I'm doing well, thanks.
We're going to talk about, a bunch of stuff. Marketing, sales, the art of the question. We're going to talk about how psychology comes into play. Heather's an expert on this. Before we get started, I want to remind you that if you like these types of interviews, you should subscribe to the YouTube channel, Michael Angelo Caruso YouTube channel. Ring that silver bell and subscribe. You'll be notified of new videos. Also, if you do presentations of any kind, you should join the Present Like a Pro Facebook group. Heather, you are with us here in Michigan, and you've been in business for 8 years. Your company's called ACE Strategies. How did you come to own a company like this?
It's a long journey. If we had a glass of wine, we could go into all the details, but just a quick synopsis. I got my bachelor's degree in psychology from Michigan State. Go Green.
Go Green.
1992. So what we do today didn't exist back then. And like many people who are in the digital world now, it's been an evolutionary process. I went through a life change about 9 years ago and decided at that time I wanted to start a business, and I had this amazing, great idea. And after a year and a half and $20,000, I realized I had no idea how to market or monetize. I'm like, well, it's a problem. So I learned, and that learning process is what brought me to where we are today.
So if people were to ask you in one sentence, what does your agency do best? It's a marketing function, but how do you say it?
Yeah, we work with clients, and our goal is to be them on LinkedIn a little bit better than they could be themselves.
Okay.
Nutshell.
You specialize in LinkedIn, but a lot of the tricks work in other platforms, as we know.
Absolutely, and one of the things I think we're going to dive a little bit more deeply into is the social platforms that are right for each business are really dependent upon who your target audience is, and it's essential that you can deep dive and really niche market to those audiences, because they hang out in different places and they need different messaging.
Yeah, I mean, you raise an interesting point. I know a lot of people that spend a ton of time on social, and they think they're banging it, but there's nothing behind the facade, you know? I've said for a long time, busy is not the same as productive.
Yes.
You can be logging a lot of time on LinkedIn, but if you don't have a backstage crew or a backstage mechanism supporting all of these posts that you're putting out, nothing's really going to happen for you, is it?
That's true, and I think with any social platform, there's, you know, with everything in life, there's that 80-20 rule, right? 80% of whatever is whatever. So in social, one of the things that I think a lot of businesses especially don't really understand is it's important to follow that 80-20 rule, even on your Facebook business page, because if everything you're posting is all about you, you know, I'm awesome, I'm great, my business has a sale today, it's like the Snoopy voice in the background. Nobody cares. It's the whole trick to the psychology of consumer marketing and I don't have my cell phone, but if I did, I'd be pointing to that, because of our insistence on having everything in the moment. We have short attention spans. So when we're looking at things that are out on social, we want them to be about us and relevant to us. And if they're not, we move on to the next.
Yeah. I've been saying for a long time, it's better to be interested and then be interesting versus the other way around.
Yes.
When I first started my blog, I got some really great advice. You remind me of this just now, that you're supposed to, at the end of every blog, ask a question. You know, how do you feel about this? Or what is the way that you cope with this problem? Because what that does is prompts the comments, right? The engagement that you're really looking for. This idea of one-way messaging, of pushing out messages and not getting anything back, is not healthy. It burns people out. You'll get sour on LinkedIn in a hurry. And I know you're big on the art of question, asking certain questions and useful questions at that. How do you think about questions?
Yeah, I think questions are within a social context with social media. I think they can be really helpful. I also think sometimes people will throw a question at the end of a post with the very obvious intent of trying to drive engagement. So I think questions need to be thoughtful. And I think too, you know, outside of social, thinking about your sales process and just approach, whether it's your marketing style or your prospecting or a sales call, whatever it is. It's really important to have a solid set of questions that are helping you better understand who's across from you, better understand their needs, their challenges, because when you can present yourself as the solution as opposed to somebody who's either throwing information or that slimy salesperson none of us want to be, I think you make a different level of connection. And my personal theory about how digital has impacted us from a psychological standpoint, I think that there's this subconscious in the back of our mind that when we're looking at somebody on social, whether it's a video or an image or something that they've posted, we start to make judgments and we start to decide if it's somebody with whom we feel connected. I told somebody the other day, I said, you could take a mass murderer and have an amazing profile and a great picture and fabulous posts, whether Facebook or LinkedIn, doesn't matter what platform it is, and people would feel like this is a really cool, great person. I know them, I like them. And then 2 weeks later, it comes out in the news that they're a serial killer, and immediately we jumped at, well, I knew something was funny about that. But it's all about the perception of how, maybe not the perception, how you're perceived by others.
Yeah, yeah, and it's got to be real. It can't be like you say, this facade. Although a lot of people get away with the facade.
Eventually, I think it comes back to bite them a little bit, right? Because if you're presented in one way, but when you start to have a conversation with somebody and you're like, oh, this is not the same person, there's that inauthenticity that I think.
Yeah, and that's why we want people listening to pay attention, because we're going to teach them how to elevate their game, level up, so that they're not just a facade. They are looked upon as a resource, a thought leader, somebody that is desirable to do business with, maybe the industry expert that they should call. I'm speaking with Heather Doering, everybody. Her website is kickacestrategies.com. A little play on words there, eh, Heather? Kick Ace Strategies. I like it. You mentioned a set of questions almost as if it's preordained. Do you have favorite questions that you recommend to clients that they have in their holster to always be at the ready?
Yeah, I think some of that is personalized and customized to the business. I have, for myself, developed over the years a set of questions that I use if I'm doing just an introductory get to know you call with somebody. You connect with somebody at a networking event or somebody on LinkedIn and you want to just learn a little bit more about them, have them learn a little bit more about you. I have certain questions that I always ask that help me better be able to explain who they are, make those right connections. And then if it's a prospecting call, I've developed a different set of questions. And I think the idea behind the questions is, number one, the goal is to gather information so that you can be a better resource. And so questions should be open-ended. They should allow conversation to flow. As you mentioned before we started, Michael, the question shouldn't be 5 minutes and then the answer is 2 seconds, right? It's all about the conversation being able to start. And so I have starter questions, and I think we all should do that for those different aspects in life. But then a big piece of this is really listening to the responses. And then those responses are going to help you ask more thoughtful questions. And by doing that, not only do you get to know the person, but if you're in a sales situation, and this is my Sandler sales training coming in, shout out to Sandler, you begin to help lead that person through a process where they realize this is my real issue and this person across from me can help me solve it.
Yeah, I like it. Let's play a little ping pong. I'll share one of my pet questions. You can share one of yours. We'll give people an idea, maybe inspire them about how they can put more nutrition into their sales calls and helping people understand, or helping our people understand who their best prospects are. I've got a favorite I've been using for a while now, and I ask it in many different ways. But the question essentially is, do you have a problem? Now, that's not an open question. That's a closed question. But here's why I want to know if you have a problem, because I'm a keynote speaker and I sell books and I sell speaker coaching. But I talk to a lot of speakers that have huge egos, and I can't get them to tell me they have a problem. Oh, I'm doing great, made all the money I could make last year. My audiences are as big as I want them to be. And we talk for 5 or 10 minutes. Sometimes they've called me for the coaching session. And then I finally say, okay, so what can I help you with? And they go, I don't know. I said, well, it sounds like you don't have any problems. Well, I don't really. And I say, well, okay, thanks for calling. And you can almost hear their chin drop. No problem to me means no sale. If you don't have a problem, I can't help you. So I like that question.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's a powerful question. And I think part of it too is figuring out what works best for you.
Yeah.
Right.
When you're onboarding a client, do you have a question like that you make sure you ask to make sure that you're a good fit?
Before we even hit the onboarding, we go through a 2-part interview. They are interviewing us and we're interviewing them. And if it doesn't feel like a good fit one way or the other, then we don't ever get to that onboarding, because there's nothing worse than being a client with somebody who you just feel like, oh, this was the biggest mistake of my life, or vice versa, as a company, having that client that either you really can't help or it just isn't a good fit.
100%.
I had to fire clients, and that's no fun.
100%. These are the types of questions that allow us to pre-qual, so that
Sure.
I think of it this way: if it's an hour meeting, I ask you these kinds of questions in the first 5 minutes. So I need to know, so I can learn if I need to stay another 55 minutes. Because if your answer is no to too many of those questions, I'm saying, we don't have much in common. Like you say, we're not a fit.
Right. And one of the things that I've implemented over the last year, and this is a hard and fast rule, it's my rule, but I don't ever take a in-person or an appointment type meeting with someone that I haven't had a pre-qualification call with, because I used to be that person that ran to every time someone wanted to meet for coffee or let's meet for lunch, I was all over the place. And boy, I ate a lot of food and drank a lot of coffee, but it didn't really help. It was oftentimes about wanting access to, I won't go into all that, but for me, that screening process and having those questions has been really, really important in not only helping me focus in on those right clients and who I can most help, but also in growing my business.
We live it's an excellent point. We live in a very sensitive society. Everybody's hypersensitive about stuff. Screening sounds mean. Like, who am I to screen people before I give them an hour and a half of my time? And I've never had a problem with screening people. I don't want to waste my time, and I don't want to waste your time. I mean, think about that innocuous invitation we get to go to lunch, and even all of us get it. Yeah. Hey, you've heard this a million times. I'll take you to lunch. I just want to pick your brain, right? And I'm thinking to myself, what do I get out of this? Oh yeah, the lunch. But I have to drive 45 minutes across town. I have to sit at least an hour and a half to be decent. And then I have to ride 45 minutes back. If I do this every day, I'm wasting three and a half hours a day.
Right.
And yet those key questions that you just so wisely indicated to us would save all that time. Now you're only meeting with people who are viable conversationalists, viable partners, viable prospects.
And a lot of those conversations for me are, I was put on this earth to connect people to people. Yeah. And I have a huge, vast network of fantastic individuals across the globe. And so part of that interview process to me, even if it's not a business prospect, it's who is it that I know in my world that might be a good connection for this individual or that individual, or you might be a really good connection for somebody I know. And it's again, those listening skills and really understanding how best I firmly believe that it's really difficult to be in business by yourself anymore. It takes that whole community of interconnectedness to grow and excel.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about open questions. You had referred to those a bit ago. Open questions are the ones that allow the conversation to flow, I think was the language that you used. So if you're listening, everybody, 2 types of questions, binary and non-binary. And Heather's going to talk now about non-binary, the ones that allow the other person to talk and pontificate and explain their situation so that you can understand exactly what's happening with your target market. Heather, how do you do this?
Yeah, so we learned all those question words when we were in first grade. So a who question, who does blah, blah, blah. That's a question that someone can respond to. But a what question, or I'm sorry, a yes and no question. So do you want to continue the conversation? Somebody can say yes, or they can say no.
Yeah.
If they say yes, then you've got to come up with whatever you're going to say next. If they say no, it's over. But if you ask a question, how would continuing the conversation benefit you?
Yeah.
They're going to be talking, they're going to be giving a response and an answer. And, one of the things that I know I'm guilty of, and I would guess I'm not the only one, is I love to talk. I love to explain things. And so I can find myself when I'm talking with somebody else, talking 80% of the time, when in reality, I should be the questioner talking about 20% of the time.
Yeah. By the way, the 80-20 rule was named after an Italian.
Really?
Alfredo Pareto. Or
is that serious?
Vilfredo Pareto. The point is, he was a paisan. So,
what a great name, too.
I know. So this open question thing is cool. And sometimes for me, and I've been a commission salesperson my whole life, so I just love this conversation. It's sometimes not a question. So I know a lot of people are watching and they're going, geez, I got to get my questions all sorted out. Sometimes it's not a question. 3 words, everybody. Tell me more.
Yes.
That's not a question at all. It's an ellipses. Tell me more, ... You zip it, like Heather's saying, stop talking, and let the other person talk about their problem. The more vivid their problem is to them, the more immediate the solution, the solution becomes more important, right?
Right. And it presents itself because it's everything, things aren't cookie cutter anymore.
No.
Every business, they all have a lot of the same issues and challenges, but the solutions need to be presented in a way that makes sense to them.
Yeah. I want to tap into your psychology degree because you had mentioned something very interesting, and we don't talk about this enough, that how fewer people are working at major corporations. A lot of us are working alone now. I heard a good word for that, solopreneurs.
Yes.
You're just working alone, and you've got partners and friendships and Zoom calls and stuff like this. But the real question I want to know is, why do we have such a reluctance to ask questions? Why is it so hard for people to just admit they don't know something, or even pretend they don't know something? Why does everybody want to talk so much?
That's a great question. I think a lot of it is we want to prove that we're that subject matter expert, that we're smart, that we know what we're talking about, that there's the fear of rejection. I mean, there are so many pieces wrapped up into that, but I think at the end of the day, it makes us feel good about ourselves when we can come out on top. I was talking with a friend of mine the other day. Her son's a freshman in college, and he's always been the smartest kid in the room, and he's not this year. And that's been a really big struggle for him.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard for us to admit that maybe we do need some help, or we may not know everything because we like to know it all, right? Yeah.
This is especially true for people that have been around for a while. They just stop asking questions because they've heard it all. Malcolm Gladwell made the statistic famous. He didn't discover it, but the 10,000 hours thing, that if you work full time, 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, that's 2,000 hours. So if you've been doing it for 5 years, you've got your 10,000 hours in. Congratulations, you're an expert. And if you're an expert, you must know a lot. And if you know a lot, then I guess you don't need to ask questions anymore. But it's all a game, everybody. I think you want to ask questions you might even think you know the answer to.
Yeah, and I think with the question piece, not only do you get great information from others, but it also it helps take the focus off of you and put it onto them, because it goes back to what we were just talking about a minute ago. We want to feel special. We want to be validated. We want to think that people are really listening. And I think the more disconnected we become from a digital standpoint, the more we crave that in our day-to-day lives.
I love it. Who is your favorite interviewer? I hadn't planned to ask you this, but it's on my mind now because interviewers make a living from asking questions. Some of them have a different pace than others. I used to laugh about Jay Leno because he was the interviewer on The Tonight Show, right? He interviewed thousands of guests through the years. Terrible interviewer. If you ever listened to him talk, he would interrupt himself. He would stumble over the words. You know, the actual like the audible track of him interviewing was so sloppy. I hope he wasn't your favorite interviewer.
No, I love Jay Leno. Who in Detroit wouldn't love Jay Leno because he's got such a passion for our city? But I'm gonna have to go. I'm gonna have to go Oprah because she really just set the stage for that personal dialogue, and relationship building that I think is so essential for every aspect of our lives.
Yeah, great interviewer and asks great questions. Thoughtful. And of course, now she's got a big production crew to kind of sort it all out for her, and good for her. But I think it's important. It's important that we model people who know what they're doing. And there's a lot of people that don't know what they're doing. And unfortunately, we tend to model them because there are so many of them. So I wanted to get a couple names in front of people that they could model. You were going to say something?
Yeah, I think one of the things about her and what I like in a good interviewer, I love Ellen DeGeneres as well because she really, they're genuine and authentic with people and they bring that out in others. Yes. Because it's easy to ask a list of questions, right? So that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's not reading your list of questions. It's conversing. It's connecting. It's building that bonding and the rapport with the person across the table.
Yeah. And don't you just hate it when this set list of questions is so preordained that it feels like the interviewer just asked that question so they could get to the next one?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what kind of brilliant answer you just gave. They're on to the next question. It sounds like a machine almost, like a bot is, engaging you. Not good, right?
Right, and that's a really good point for having that list of questions. You don't want to shoot through them as if you're reading off that list. You want it to be a natural process, but and you may not ask every question every time, but at least you've got a comfortable place to start that conversation.
So let's bring this full circle again and even talk about relationships. It doesn't have to be business. The role of questions in marketing, onboarding clients, maintaining the important relationships in your life. Nobody likes to be managed. Nobody likes to be processed. So this idea of questions allows that give and take. I'm interested in your opinion. Letting the other person have space to communicate, that silence that we talked about earlier. This even happens on the internet. It even happens on the web, right?
Yeah. How
do questions work in internet marketing?
I think I'm going to give you a really silly example of, I think it's the questions that make people feel like they're genuinely a part of something. I did an experiment back in the spring. I had new headshots. I was featured on the cover of a magazine. So they hired a photographer. She did these amazing headshots and everybody liked the same one. 90% of people, it's the one that's on my LinkedIn profile. And on a Friday at 4:00, I did a LinkedIn experiment, and that's the worst time ever to post on LinkedIn because everybody's gone for the day. I put together a little collage of 5 of the pictures. I numbered them 1 through 5, and I said, just had my new headshots come in. Which one's your favorite? That post over a 10-day period reached over 5,000 people. I had over 400 people vote on a picture, and most of them don't even know me, right? That was a lesson to me, and it doesn't matter. It wasn't an amazing insight or a great thought or anything else. It was about people feeling like they were engaged and had a voice in something.
Yeah.
So I think those are the types of questions that start to generate some traction.
And if I may, the type of question, low barrier to entry. Anybody can have an opinion about this. It wasn't like you had to have a background of information to decide which photo you liked.
And who cares? I mean, it had nothing to, there was no different outcome came from people participating in that except they felt like they had a voice.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
And I think we see a lot of that on internet marketing because of the layout of pages and stuff. You know, it's all about where's the person going to go to get the click. There's even software for this, I think, where it maps the eyes and where the eyes go on the page.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty fancy. And so this idea of being inquisitive and being able to solicit questions is really, really key in all of your relationships, business and personal. Heather, you're fabulous. Thank you so much for your expertise today. I want to promote you and send people to your website again, kickacestrategies.com. You do a fabulous LinkedIn profile valued at $200 for anybody that wants to talk to you. Is that how it works?
A profile review. So we do an audit and then just help talk them through the changes that they can make to tweak and just improve the look and feel a little bit.
I love it. And if they don't want to do that, you'll sub out a strategy call of some sort?
Absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of times too, it's just understanding how do you find that ideal audience? Who are they? And what does that strategy look like?
Excellent.
Yeah.
You're also involved with a local group here in town. And when I say in town, we're talking about Southeastern Michigan, everybody. Tell everybody about this event that you have every April.
Yeah, so in my not regular business, I have a women's entrepreneurs group that I run here locally in the Metro Detroit area. But part of that is every April, the Federal Reserve Bank puts on an initiative nationwide called Money Smart Week. And in Michigan, we have usually between 500, 600 events throughout the state. And one of our headliner events is the Fempreneur Summit. And that happens every April. And it's an opportunity for women entrepreneurs to come together to learn, to educate, and to impact their businesses.
I love it. I'm sure you do a great turn for them, and you have so much to offer. So it's kickacestrategies.com, everybody. Heather Doering, thanks for being with me today.
Thank you.
And don't forget, everybody, if you like these kinds of interviews, subscribe to this channel now so that you're notified of all the new ones coming up. You're welcome to look back through the playlist and check out the older interviews. And if you do speaking of any kind, I'll see you on the Present Like a Pro Facebook group. See you, Heather.
Thanks, Michael. Bye-bye.